Welcome to my channel. My name's Adina. I'm an intuitive astrologer. This is one of the most important and dynamic forecasts you're going to listen to this year. From July 26, 2026 to March 26, 2028, we are entering one of the most defining collective shifts of this decade as the lunar nodes move into Leo and Aquarius. This is not a subtle or small transition. This is a reorientation of where attention goes, where power goes, and how we define identity, purpose, and connection in a rapidly changing world. This cycle is going to touch everything from leadership and fame to technology, artificial intelligence, social systems, communities, and the future direction of humanity itself. It's about how we show up as individuals, but also how we function as part of something much larger than ourselves. And what's really important is that this didn't just start now in July. The story already started earlier this year when we had the Aquarius Solar Eclipse, February 17th. That eclipse was the first doorway. It was the opening chapter. It gave us a preview of what this entire cycle is about. So, if you think back to earlier 2026, there may have already been subtle or even very noticeable shifts around your friendships, your relationship to social media or technology, your sense of identity, or even a growing awareness that your life needed to move in a more future oriented direction. That eclipse planted the seed. Now, as we move into this longer cycle, that seed begins to grow. To really understand what's happening here, we need to ground ourselves in what the lunar nodes actually represent. The North Node shows us where we are being pulled to grow. It's unfamiliar, sometimes even uncomfortable, but it's the direction of evolution. The South Node represents where we're coming from. It holds old habits, familiar patterns, and ways of being that we may have outgrown or that we're being asked to rebalance. This is not about punishment. It's not about abandoning parts of ourselves either. It's about recognizing where we may be over identifying with something that once worked, but no longer supports where we're going. And with the North Node in Aquarius and the South Node in Leo, the message becomes very clear. We're being asked to move from performance into purpose, from ego into community, from individual spotlight into collective contribution. But before we fully step into that, there's something still closing. Because while this Aquarius and Leo storyline is opening, the Virgo and Pisces eclipse cycle that began back in January 2025 is still wrapping up. The cycle has been deeply focused on healing, boundaries, routines, emotional overwhelm, and the balance between control and surrender. It has been asking us to get real about what is sustainable in our daily lives, in our mental health, and in the way we give and receive energy. So, throughout 2026 and into early 2027, we are in a bridge. One chapter is closing while another is opening. You may feel this as a sense of being in between worlds. You're not who you were in 2025, but you're still becoming who you're meant to be moving forward. And that brings us to that February 17th, 2026 Aquarius solar eclipse. That eclipse was the first initiation into this new cycle. It was a reset around the future, around technology, around community, around the systems and networks that connect us. For many people, that eclipse may have brought shifts in friendships, new communities forming, changes in how you use the internet, or even a desire to detach from an identity that no longer felt aligned. There may have been a quiet or strong pull toward something bigger than yourself, toward contributing to a larger conversation or being part of something that extends beyond personal recognition. That was not random. That was the beginning. Now, as the North Node moves through Aquarius, that energy expands. Aquarius is about systems, networks, innovation, and the future. It's about thinking beyond yourself and asking, how does what I do impact the collective? It's about collaboration, not just visibility. At its highest expression, this is visionary. It's about building something that actually matters. It's about using technology, ideas, and connection to solve problems and create meaningful change. But there is also a shadow. Aquarius can become disconnected. It can lose emotional warmth. It can get caught in groupthink or detach too much from the human element in pursuit of progress. So, as funny as this sounds, part of this cycle is going to be learning how to stay human while engaging with increasingly digital and complex systems. At the same time, the South Node in Leo is clearing something out. Leo is not a bad energy. Leo is creativity, heart, joy, courage, and authentic self expression. But when it's imbalanced, it can become about performance or validation and needing to be seen in order to feel worthy. So, over the next couple of years, we're going to see a shift in how we relate to fame, influencers, public figures, and even our own sense of identity. There may be a release of old creative identities, a questioning of leadership that is built more on image than integrity, a collective fatigue around performative confidence and constant visibility. This doesn't mean we stop expressing ourselves. It means we return to expression that is real, grounded, and aligned with purpose rather than applause. And you're going to see this play out very clearly through the eclipses. The August 12th, 2026 total solar eclipse in Leo is a major reset around identity, ego, and visibility. This can bring endings or shifts in how we show up, especially if that identity has been built around external validation. Then, just a couple weeks later, on August 28th, 2026, we have a Pisces Virgo lunar eclipse, continuing to clear out old emotional patterns, habits, and ways of coping that began back in 2025. By early 2027, with the Aquarius solar eclipse on February 6th, we start to see stronger beginnings around technology, community, and future oriented goals. But even then, the Virgo Pisces cycle still has its final say with the February 20th, 2027 eclipse, asking us one last time to release perfectionism over sacrifice and emotional overwhelm. And then as we move deeper into this cycle, the Leo eclipses intensify. August 2nd, 2027 becomes a major turning point, a powerful release of old ego driven systems, identities, and patterns that have been overinflated, followed by the Aquarius Leo lunar eclipse on August 17th, which brings an emotional culmination around the balance between personal recognition and collective contribution. And by January 26, 2028, with the final Aquarius solar eclipse, we see the next phase of the future beginning to take shape. But it's not just the eclipses. The planetary alignments during this cycle tell a very powerful story. November 2026 stands out as one of the most intense periods. Jupiter and Mars both activate the South Node in Leo, amplifying themes of ego, visibility, leadership, and performance. This can bring expansion and opportunity, but also exposure. Whereas pride become too rigid, whereas validation become the goal instead of authenticity. Then in April 2027, Saturn supports the North Node, helping us build something real, something sustainable. This is where the vision starts becoming practical. By October 2027, Uranus brings innovation, breakthroughs, and rapid changes in technology and communication. And then in November 2027, one of the most important alignments of the entire cycle occurs as Pluto meets the North Node in Aquarius. This is a deep transformation of power, of systems, of how technology, networks, and collective influence are used. This is where the conversation around AI, surveillance, social systems, and group dynamics become impossible to ignore, not in a fear based way, but in a way that demands awareness. And throughout all of this, there's questions that this cycle is asking you to sit with. What began shifting around February 17th, 2026? What new community, vision, or direction started opening for you? What have you been closing out since January 2025 in terms of your health, your boundaries, your routines, and your emotional patterns? Where are you performing for approval? Where are you afraid to collaborate? Where are you chasing recognition instead of creating from the heart? How can you engage with technology without disconnecting from your humanity? What communities and connections actually align with your future? And where are you being called to lead, not from ego, but from authenticity? Because that is the essence of this cycle. It's not asking you to disappear, it's asking you to evolve, to move from being seen to being of service in a meaningful way, to move from standing alone on a stage to building something that includes others. And as we close this out, remember this: the Aquarius Solar Eclipse on February 17th, 2026, opened the first doorway into this new chapter. It gave you a glimpse of where your life was heading. At the same time, the Virgo and Pisces eclipses have been helping you clean up what was no longer sustainable emotionally, spiritually, and practically. Now, as we move forward, the message becomes clear. The South Node in Leo clears the old stage, while the North Node in Aquarius builds the new network. And your role in that shift matters more than you think. Now let's get into how this is affecting all 12 rising signs. Aries, welcome to your forecast for one of the most defining cycles you're going to experience over the next couple of years. From July 26, 2026 to March 26, 2028, the lunar nodes move into Leo and Aquarius. And for you, this is activating your 11th house of community, networks, and the future, and your 5th house of identity, creativity, romance, and self expression. This is where major beginnings and major endings are unfolding in your life. And I want you to understand this clearly from the start. This is not a random shift. This is a reorientation of how you see yourself, how you express yourself, and where you belong in the world. Because for Aries Rising, Leo rules your 5th house. This is your creativity, your passions, your confidence, your dating life, your relationship to joy, your inner child, and even how you want to be seen and recognized. And with the South Node moving through this part of your chart, there is a clearing happening here. At the same time, Aquarius rules your 11th house. This is your friendships, your communities, your networks, your long term goals, your social environment, and your connection to something bigger than yourself. And with the North Node moving through this space, this is where life is pulling you forward. So, this cycle is asking you to move from a very personal expression of identity into a more collective, future oriented version of yourself. But this didn't just start in July. If you go back to February 17th, 2026, there was a solar eclipse in Aquarius in your 11th house. That was the first initiation into this story. That eclipse may have brought new people into your life, or it may have started shifting your social circle. You may have felt a pull toward a new community, a new direction, or even a new vision for your future that didn't fully make sense yet. For some of you, it may have been subtle. For others, it may have been a clear moment of realization. That was the seed. Now, as the nodes move into Leo and Aquarius, that seed begins to grow into real, tangible change. But at the same time, you're still closing out the Virgo Pisces eclipse cycle, which has been happening in your 6th and 12th houses since January 2025. And this is really important because it's part of the story. The last couple of years have been asking you to clean up your routines, your habits, your health, your mental state, and your relationship with stress, burnout, and emotional overwhelm. You've been learning boundaries. You've been learning what you can and cannot carry. So now, as you step into this new cycle, you're not the same version of yourself that you were before. You're more aware, you're more discerning. And that's going to matter because this next chapter is about where you place your energy moving forward. Now, let's talk about what's actually shifting for you. With the South Node in your 5th house, there is this release happening around how you define yourself. You may start to notice that things that once gave you a sense of identity or validation don't hit the same way anymore. This can show up in your creative life, your dating life, or even how you present yourself. You may realize that you've been performing in certain ways, trying to be seen, trying to be recognized, trying to hold on to a version of yourself that once felt exciting, but now feels limiting. For some of you, this could look like changes in romance. Old patterns in dating may come to the surface to be cleared. Situations that are based more on attention than genuine connection may begin to fall away. For others, this could be a shift in creativity. You may stop creating for validation and start asking yourself, what actually feels real to me? And this can feel uncomfortable at times because Leo energy is tied to your confidence. So, as this is being recalibrated, there may be moments where you feel less certain, less expressive, or even more introspective than usual. But this is not you losing yourself. This is you refining yourself. At the same time, the North Node is pulling you into your 11th house, and this is where things start to open. You're being guided toward new communities, new friendships, new collaborations, and new long term visions for your life. This is where you start to realize that your life is not meant to be lived in isolation, that your path is connected to other people, that there's something bigger you're meant to contribute to. And this may show up in very real ways. You may meet people who completely shift your perspective. You may find yourself stepping into new social spaces, online or even in person. You may become more involved in group projects, organizations, or causes that align with your values. For some of you, this may involve technology, social media, or new platforms in a different way than before. Not as a place to perform, but as a place to connect and build something meaningful. And this is where the tension of this cycle lives, because part of you may still want to hold on to the familiar, the part of you that wants to stand out, to be recognized, to do things your own way. But life is asking you to expand beyond that, to collaborate, to listen, to be part of something. And this doesn't mean you stop being yourself. It means your individuality becomes more powerful when it's connected to a larger purpose. Now, as we move through the eclipses, these themes become very real. The August 12th, 2026 solar eclipse in Leo hits your fifth house directly. This is a major reset in how you see yourself. This can bring endings or turning points in romance, creativity, or identity. Something about who you thought you were is being released. And then just weeks later, the August 28th eclipse in your 6th and 12th houses continue to clear out old habits, stress patterns, and emotional baggage. By February 6, 2027, with the Aquarius Solar Eclipse in your 11th house, new doors begin to open, new people, new visions, new directions. But even then, the February 20th, 2027 eclipse reminds you to let go of what's still draining you. Then we move into 2027, and this is where things intensify. The August 2nd, 2027 solar eclipse in Leo is one of your biggest release points. This is where you're letting go of an older version of yourself in a very real way. This can be emotional. It can feel like an identity shedding. And then on August 17th, 2027, the Leo Aquarius lunar eclipse brings a culmination between your 5th and 11th houses. This is where you see clearly the balance between who you are and where you belong, between self expression and collective contribution, between doing things for yourself and doing things that matter beyond you. And throughout this entire cycle, there are key moments that push you forward. November 2026 may bring intensity around ego, identity, and visibility. You may feel pulled between wanting recognition and needing to evolve beyond it. By April 2027, things begin to stabilize. You start building something more grounded, something real. And then by late 2027, especially around November, there is a deep transformation in your relationship with community, power, and your role in the collective. You may realize that your future is not what you originally imagined, but it's more aligned than ever. And through all of this, there are questions you need to sit with. What began shifting for you around February 2026? What communities are you being drawn toward? Where are you still performing for approval? Where are you afraid to collaborate? Where are you holding on to an identity that no longer fits? And where are you being asked to contribute to something bigger than yourself? Because Aries, this is your shift from this is who I am to this is what I'm here to build. from standing alone to standing with others, from being seen to being meaningful. And as we close this out, remember this: the past couple of years helped you clean up your habits, your energy, and your emotional patterns. Now, this cycle is asking you to step into your future, to find your people, to align your creativity with purpose, and to understand that your power doesn't come from how loudly you shine alone. It comes from what you help create together. Because the South Node in your fifth house is clearing the old stage. So the North Node in your 11th house can help you build the life, the network, and the future that actually aligns with who you're becoming. Taurus, welcome to one of the most defining cycles you're going to move through over the next couple of years. From July 26, 2026 to March 26, 2028, the lunar nodes shift into Leo and Aquarius, activating your 10th house of career, reputation, and public life, and your 4th house of home, family, and emotional foundations. And this is where major beginnings and major endings are taking place for you. This is not just a surface level change. This is a restructuring of your life direction, of where you're going, what you're known for, and what kind of life you're building behind the scenes. Because for Taurus Rising, Leo rules your 4th house. This is your home, your family, your private life, your emotional security, and your roots. And the South Node moving through this part of your chart, there's this clearing out happening here. At the same time, Aquarius rules your 10th house. And this is your career, your reputation, your public visibility, your goals, and the direction your life is moving in. And with the North Node here, this is where life is pulling you forward. So this cycle is asking you to move from a strong attachment to the past into a future that requires you to step out into the world in a new way. But just like with everything in astrology, this didn't start just in July. If you go back to February 17th, 2026, there was a solar eclipse in Aquarius in your 10th house. That was the first initiation into this story. That eclipse may have brought a shift in your career direction, your goals, or how you see your role in the world. You may have started questioning where you were headed, or you may have felt a pull towards something new, even if you didn't fully understand it yet. For some of you, opportunities may have appeared. For others, it may have been a realization that something needed to change. That was the seed being planted. Now, as the nodes move into Leo and Aquarius, that seed begins to take shape. But at the same time, we are still closing out the Virgo Pisces eclipse cycle, which has been happening in your 5th and 11th houses since January 2025. And this is important because over the past couple of years, you've been learning about creativity, self-expression, friendships, and the balance between doing what you love and being a part of something bigger. You've been redefining your relationship to joy, to your social life, to your creative voice, and to the people you surround yourself with. So now, as you step into this new chapter, you're not coming in blindly. You're coming in with more awareness about what actually matters to you. Now let's talk about what's shifting. With the South Node in your 4th house, there's a release happening around your foundation. This can show up in many different ways. For some of you, this could literally involve changes in your home, moving, relocating, or restructuring your living situation. For others, this is more emotional. You may be releasing old family patterns, old attachments, or ways of seeking security that are no longer supporting your growth. You may notice yourself outgrowing certain dynamics, or realizing that what once felt safe is now holding you back. There can also be moments where you feel pulled inward, where emotions from the past come up to be processed and released. This is not about losing your foundation. This is about rebuilding it in a healthier, more aligned way. Now, at the same time, the North Node is pulling you into your 10th house, and this is where your life begins to expand. You're being called to step into a new level of visibility, a new level of responsibility, a new direction in your career or public life. This may feel uncomfortable at times, especially if you are someone who prefers stability and familiarity, because this energy is asking you to take risks, to step outside of your comfort zone, to be seen in a different way. And this may show up in very real ways, like new career opportunities, a shift in your professional life, a desire to build something meaningful in the world, or even a complete change in how you define success. For some of you, this may involve technology, social platforms, or working within networks or communities in a new way. Aquarius energy often brings in innovation. So your path forward may not look traditional. And this is where the tension comes in because part of you may want to stay where it's comfortable, to stay rooted in what you know, to prioritize emotional security over external growth. But life is asking you to expand, to trust that you can create stability while also evolving, to understand that your sense of security doesn't just come from where you've been, it also comes from where you're going. Now, as we move through the eclipses, these themes become very real. The August 12th, 2026 solar eclipse in Leo hits your fourth house directly. This is a major reset in your home and personal life. This can bring endings, relocations, or emotional turning points connected to family and your foundation. Then, just weeks later, the August 28th eclipse in your 5th, 11th house axis continues to close out old patterns in your social life and creative expression that began back in January 2025. By February 6th, 2027, with the Aquarius solar eclipse in your 10th house, new doors begin to open in your career and public life. And this is powerful new beginnings. But even then, the February 20th eclipse reminds you to release what's still draining your energy with that Virgo Pisces axis. Then we move into 2027, and this is where things begin to deepen. The August 2nd, 2027 solar eclipse in Leo begins a major release point in your fourth house. And this can bring a final letting go of something connected to your past, your home, or your emotional foundation. Then on August 17th, 2027, the Leo Aquarius lunar eclipse brings a culmination between your fourth and 10th houses. And this is where you see clearly the balance between your private life and your public life, between where you come from and where you're going, between emotional security and external success. And throughout this entire cycle, there are key moments that push you forward. November 2026 may bring intensity around home, family, and emotional patterns. Things may feel amplified, bringing clarity around what needs to change. By April 2027, things begin to stabilize. You start building something more structured and sustainable in your career. And by late 2027, especially around November, there is a deep transformation in your public life, in your direction, in your sense of purpose. You may finally realize your path is evolving in ways you didn't expect, but it's leading you somewhere more aligned. And through all of this, there are questions you need to sit with. What began shifting for you around February 2026 when it has to do with your career and life direction? What are you being called to build? What have you been closing out since January 2025 in your creative life and your social world? Where are you holding on to the past for comfort? Where are you afraid to step into visibility? What does success actually mean to you now? And what kind of life do you want to create, both publicly and privately? Because this is your shift, Taurus. You're shifting from this is where I feel safe to this is where I'm going, from holding on to the past to building your future, from staying behind the scenes to stepping into your purpose. And as we close this out, remember this, Taurus. The past couple of years have been helping you redefine your joy, your creativity, and your relationships. Now, this cycle is asking you to step into your next level, to release what no longer supports your foundation, to build something meaningful in the world, and to trust that you can create both stability and growth at the same time. Because the South Node in your fourth house is clearing the old foundations. The North Node in your 10th house can help you build the life, the direction, and the legacy that truly reflects who you're becoming. Gemini, welcome to one of the most expansive and perspective shifting cycles you're going to experience over the next couple of years. From July 26, 2026 to March 26, 2028, the lunar nodes move into Leo and Aquarius, activating your ninth house of belief systems, growth, travel, and higher understanding, and your third house of communication, thinking patterns, and your immediate environment. This is where major endings and major beginnings are unfolding in your life. And this is not just about external change. This is about how you think, what you believe, and the direction your life is moving in based on those beliefs. Because for Gemini Rising, Leo rules your third house. And this is your mind, your voice, your communication style, your daily interactions, and your learning patterns, even the way you process information. And with the South Node moving through this part of your chart, there's a clearing happening here. Now, at the same time, Aquarius rules your ninth house, and this is your belief systems, your worldview, your long-term vision, your education, your spirituality, and your sense of meaning. And with the North Node here, this is where life is pulling you forward. So this cycle is asking you to move from familiar ways of thinking into a broader, more expanded perspective on life. But just like everything in astrology, this didn't just begin in July. If you go back to February 17th, 2026, there was a solar eclipse in Aquarius in your ninth house. That was the first initiation into this story. That eclipse may have sparked a shift in your beliefs. You may have started questioning something that you once thought was true, or you may have felt pulled toward learning something new, exploring a different path, or seeing life from a completely different angle. For some of you, this may have involved travel, education, or exposure to new ideas or cultures. For others, it may have been more internal, a quiet realization that your mindset was changing. That was the seed. And now, as the nodes move into Leo and Aquarius, that seed begins to expand into something much more tangible. But at the same time, you're still closing out the Virgo Pisces cycle, which has been happening in your 4th and 10th houses since January 2025. And this matters because over the past couple of years, you've been working through themes around your home, your family, your emotional foundations, and your career, public life. You've been learning about balance between your personal world and your external responsibilities. You've been redefining what stability looks like for you, both internally and externally. So now, as you move into this new cycle, you're doing so with a deeper understanding of what grounds you and what direction you actually want to move toward. Now let's talk about what's shifting. With the South Node in your third house, there's a release happening around your thinking patterns and communication style. You may start to notice that the way you've been processing information, speaking, or interacting with others is changing. Old habits and communication may come to the surface. This could be overthinking, reacting quickly, needing to always have an answer, or staying in familiar mental loops that keep you in the same place. For some of you, this could show up in your immediate environment, changes to your daily routine, your neighborhood, or even your relationship with your siblings or the people that you interact with on a daily basis. There may also be a sense of outgrowing certain conversations, certain environments, or certain ways of expressing yourself. This can feel uncomfortable at times because this is your natural domain. You're used to thinking quickly, adapting, and staying mentally engaged. But this cycle is asking you to slow down and question, is this thought pattern actually aligned with where I'm going? At the same time, the North Node is pulling you into your ninth house, and this is where your life begins to expand. You're being guided toward new perspectives, new belief systems, new knowledge, and new experiences that broaden your understanding of life. And this may show up in very real ways. A desire to study something new, travel, explore different philosophies, step outside of your usual environment, or even completely change the way you see the world. For some of you, this may involve teaching, publishing, or sharing your knowledge on a larger scale. For others, it may be about finding a deeper sense of purpose and meaning. And this is where the tension of this cycle exists, because part of you may start to stay in what's familiar, the conversations you know, the environments you're comfortable in, the way you've always processed things. But life is asking you to expand beyond that, to think bigger, to see further, to step outside of what's immediately in front of you and connect to a larger vision. Now, as we move through the eclipses, these themes become very real. The August 12th, 2026 solar eclipse in Leo hits your third house directly. And this is a major reset in how you think, speak, and communicate. This can bring endings or shifts in your environment, your routines, or your mental patterns. Then, just weeks later, on August 28th, that eclipse hits your 4th and 10th houses, which are the continuation of the energy and cycle you've already been in since January 2025. Now, by February 6, 2027, with the Aquarius Solar Eclipse in your ninth house, new doors begin to open, new opportunities to grow, learn, and expand your life direction. But even then, the February 20th eclipse reminds you to release what's still out of balance in your foundation and responsibilities. Then we move into 2027, and this is where things deepen. The August 2nd, 2027 solar eclipse in Leo becomes a major release point in your third house. And this is where you're letting go of outdated ways of thinking and communicating in a very real way. And then on August 17th, 2027, the Leo and Aquarius lunar eclipse brings a culmination between your third and ninth houses. And this is where you see clearly the balance between what you know and what you're still learning, between your current perspective and the bigger picture, between staying where you are and expanding into something more. And throughout this entire cycle, there are key moments that push you forward. November 2026 may bring intensity around communication, conversations, and how you express yourself. You may feel challenged to speak more honestly or to rethink certain perspectives. By April 2027, things begin to stabilize. You start integrating what you've been learning in a more grounded way. And by late 2027, especially around November, there is a deep transformation in your belief system and how you see the world and what you believe is possible for your life. You may realize that your path is expanding in ways you didn't expect, but it's leading you towards something much bigger. And through all of this, there are questions you need to sit with. What began shifting for you around February 2026? What beliefs are you outgrowing? Where are you avoiding growth because it feels unfamiliar? Where are you stuck in old thought patterns? What knowledge or experience are you being called toward? And what does your life look like when you allow yourself to think beyond your current reality? Because Gemini, this is your shift from this is what I know to this is what I'm learning. From staying in the familiar to exploring the unknown. From thinking small to thinking big. And as we close this out, remember this, the past couple of years have been helping you stabilize your life, your home, and your direction. Now, this cycle is asking you to expand your mind, your beliefs, and your future, to release outdated ways of thinking, to step into a broader perspective, and to trust that your life is meant to grow beyond what you've known. Because the South Node in your third house is clearing old mental patterns, and the North Node in your ninth house can guide you toward a new vision, a new path, and a deeper understanding of what your life can become. Cancer, welcome to one of the most transformative financial, emotional, and psychological cycles you're going to experience over the next couple of years. From July 26, 2026 to March 26, 2028, the lunar nodes move into Leo and Aquarius, activating your ethos of transformation, shared resources, intimacy, healing, and release, and your second house of income, personal values, possessions, and self-worth. This is where major beginnings and major endings are unfolding in your life. This isn't simply about money, although finances may absolutely be part of the story. This is about what you truly value, what you depend on, and how you create security in your life. It's about moving away from defining your worth through what you own or what you've built and learning how to trust deeper forms of support, vulnerability, and transformation. Because Cancer, Leo rules your second house. So this is your income, your talents, your possessions, your confidence, your relationship with money, and your sense of value. As the South Node moves through this part of your chart, life begins clearing away outdated ideas about security and self-worth. At the same time, Aquarius rules your eighth house. This is the house of shared finances, investments, taxes, inheritance, debt, emotional intimacy, psychological healing, and profound life changes. With the North Node moving through this space, this is where your soul is being asked to grow. This cycle is asking you to move from relying on what you can personally control toward learning how to trust deeper connections, shared resources, and the transformative process of life itself. But the story didn't begin in July. If you go back to February 17th, 2026, there was a solar eclipse in Aquarius in your eighth house. That eclipse was the first initiation into this journey. For some of you, this may have marked the beginning of important financial conversations involving loans, investments, taxes, insurance, or shared income. Others may have experienced emotional breakthroughs, therapy, healing work, or situations that required greater trust and vulnerability. Some of you may have become aware that an old version of yourself was coming to an end, even if you couldn't yet explain why. That eclipse planted the seed. Now, as the nodes officially enter Leo and Aquarius, that process begins accelerating. At the very same time, however, you're still closing out the Virgo and Pisces eclipse cycle that began in January 2025. And for Cancer Rising, those eclipses have been activating your third and ninth houses. Over the past couple of years, you've been challenged to rethink your beliefs, improve communication, expand your perspective, and become more discerning about the information you absorb. You may have changed your outlook on life, questioned long held beliefs, pursued education, or discovered entirely new ways of understanding yourself and the world. Those lessons are still being completed. This means you're standing on a bridge between two very different chapters. One cycle has been teaching you how to think differently. This next cycle teaches you how to live differently. Now let's talk about what's changing. With the South Node moving through your second house, there's a release happening around your relationship with money, security, and self-worth. This doesn't automatically mean financial loss. Instead, life begins asking deeper questions. Where have you attached your identity to what you own? Where have you believed that your value depends on your income, achievements, or possessions? Where has fear or scarcity quietly influenced your decisions? For some Cancer risings, income sources may naturally evolve. Careers may shift. Financial priorities may change. You may begin earning money differently than you have before. Others may realize they're no longer motivated by status, accumulation, or proving their worth through external success. This can also become a period where hidden talents emerge. Sometimes the South Node strips away old definitions, so your authentic gifts can finally surface. At times, you may feel uncertain. Cancer naturally seeks security, and watching old foundations change can feel uncomfortable. But this isn't life taking something away, it's life helping you build security on something deeper than circumstances alone. At the same time, the North Node is pulling you toward your eighth house, and this is where profound transformation begins. You may become more interested in psychology, healing, spirituality, or understanding yourself beneath the surface. You may experience important developments involving shared finances, investments, inheritance, business partnerships, or financial support from others. For some of you, relationships can become significantly deeper. This cycle asks you to move beyond surface level connections and into genuine emotional intimacy. It asks you to trust. It asks you to receive. And for Cancer rising, that isn't always easy. You often feel safest when you're nurturing others. But this cycle asks whether you're equally willing to let others support you. Can you receive help? Can you share responsibility? Can you allow yourself to be vulnerable without feeling like you're losing control? These are some of the deeper lessons unfolding now. Now let's look at how the eclipses activate these themes. The August 12th, 2026 solar eclipse in Leo lands in your second house. This becomes a major reset around finances, self-worth, income, possessions, and what truly gives you stability. Something about your relationship with value begins changing. And then just a couple of weeks later, on August 28th, that eclipse continues closing out your third and ninth house Virgo Pisces story, helping you release outdated beliefs, communication habits, and mental patterns that you've been working through since January 2025. And then on February 6, 2027, the Aquarius Solar Eclipse activates your eighth house once again. And this opens powerful new beginnings involving healing, emotional transformation, financial partnerships, investments, intimacy, and shared resources. The February 20th eclipse continues completing that Virgo Pisces cycle, helping you integrate the wisdom you've gained over the previous years. And then by August 2nd, 2027, another solar eclipse in Leo becomes one of the biggest release points of the entire cycle. And this may coincide with significant financial decisions, changing priorities, or a complete shift in what you define as success and security. Then on August 17th, 2027, the Aquarius Leo lunar eclipse brings an emotional culmination across your second and eighth houses. And this is where you clearly see the balance between what belongs solely to you and what you're meant to build with others, between independence and interdependence, between control and trust. And throughout this cycle, several important planetary alignments deepen the story. November 2026 may amplify financial matters and questions of self worth, bringing hidden matters into full view so they can finally be addressed. April 2027 offers grounding and stability, helping you make practical decisions that strengthen both your emotional and financial future. Then during late 2027, especially around Pluto's conjunction with the North Node, this becomes one of the deepest periods of transformation you've experienced in years, really. You may completely change how you relate to power, trust, intimacy, and emotional healing. The old version of yourself simply no longer fits. And through all of this, there are really important questions to reflect on. What began shifting around February 17th, 2026? What fears around trust, vulnerability, or shared resources have been surfacing? What beliefs about money or self worth are you beginning to outgrow? Where are you trying to control everything because it feels safer? Where are you being invited to receive instead of carrying everything alone? What does true security actually mean to you now? And where is life asking you to transform rather than simply preserve what's familiar? Because, Cancer, this is your shift from holding tightly to trusting deeply, from defining your value through what you own to recognizing the value of who you are, from surviving to transforming. And as we close this out, remember this. The past couple of years have been helping you expand your perspective, strengthen your voice, and rethink the beliefs that shape your life. Now, this cycle asks you to transform from the inside out, to release outdated definitions of security, to heal old fears around trust and vulnerability, to discover that your greatest strength doesn't come from controlling every outcome. It comes from allowing life to reshape you into someone even stronger. Because the South Node in your second house is clearing outdated ideas of security and self worth. So the North Node in your eighth house can guide you toward deeper healing, authentic empowerment, meaningful intimacy, and a life built on trust rather than fear. Leo, welcome to one of the most life changing cycles you're going to experience over the next couple of years. From July 26, 2026 to March 26, 2028, the lunar nodes move into Leo and Aquarius, activating your seventh house of relationships, partnerships, and one on one connections, and your first house of identity, independence, and the way you move through the world. This is where major beginnings and major endings are unfolding in your life. For you, this is one of the most personal nodal cycles because it falls directly across the relationship axis of your chart. It's asking profound questions about who you are, who you're becoming, and how your closest relationships reflect that journey. Because for Leo rising, the South Node is moving through your first house. And this is the house of identity, your physical presence, your confidence, your independence, and the story you've been telling yourself about who you are. As the South Node travels through this part of your chart, life begins clearing away old identities, outdated ways of presenting yourself, and patterns that may have become too centered around carrying everything on your own. At the same time, the North Node moves into Aquarius, activating your seventh house of committed relationships, business partnerships, clients, collaborations, and meaningful one on one connections. And this is where life is asking you to grow. So, this entire cycle is asking you to move from defining life primarily through me toward understanding the power of we. But the story didn't just begin in July. If you go back to February 17th, 2026, there was a solar eclipse in Aquarius in your seventh house. That eclipse was your first initiation into this new chapter. For some of you, a new relationship may have entered your life. Others may have experienced important developments within an existing partnership. Some of you may have begun attracting different kinds of people altogether, while others realize certain relationships have naturally reached the end of their purpose. Even if nothing dramatic happened externally, something may have shifted internally. You may have started realizing that the relationships you want moving forward need to build on equality, shared vision, and mutual growth rather than simply familiarity. That eclipse planted the seed. And now, as the lunar nodes officially enter Leo and Aquarius, that seed begins to grow into lasting change. At the same time, however, you're still completing another important story. Since January 2025, the Virgo and Pisces eclipse cycle has been activating your second and eighth houses. So, over the past couple of years, you've been learning powerful lessons around money, self worth, shared resources, emotional trust, and what true security really means. You may have been healing financial patterns, learning healthier boundaries around giving and receiving, or transforming your relationship with intimacy and vulnerability. Those lessons are still wrapping up throughout 2026 and into early 2027. So this means you're standing between two chapters. One that has been helping you redefine your values and your relationship with security. And now the next chapter asks you to redefine your relationships. So now let's talk about what's changing. With the South Node moving through your first house, there is a release happening around your identity. This doesn't mean you're losing yourself. It means you're shedding versions of yourself that no longer reflect who you're becoming, that are no longer aligned. For Leo Rising, this could feel especially significant because your identity is naturally something you invest deeply into. You take pride in who you are, your individuality, and your ability to lead. But during this cycle, life asks, who are you beneath the labels? Who are you when you're no longer trying to prove yourself? Where have you been carrying an image that no longer feels authentic? Some of you may change your appearance. Others may change your priorities, your confidence, or even the way you introduce yourself to the world. You may find yourself letting go of old ambitions, old roles, or old expectations you've carried for years. Sometimes people around you may even notice you've changed before you fully even realize it yourself. This isn't about becoming less of yourself, it's about becoming more authentic. Now, at the same time, the North Node is pulling you toward your seventh house, and this is where your greatest opportunities begin to unfold. You're being guided toward relationships that support your future rather than your past. For some, this could bring the beginning of an important romantic relationship. For others, it may deepen an existing partnership through greater honesty, teamwork, and shared purpose. Business partnerships, contracts, collaborations, and client relationships can also become incredibly important during this period. The seventh house isn't only about romance, it's about every significant one on one relationship that shapes your life. This cycle teaches that strength doesn't always come from standing alone. Sometimes it comes from learning how to trust someone enough to build something together. And that may be one of your biggest lessons because Leo energy naturally values independence, leadership, and personal expression. Aquarius reminds you that your greatest impact often comes through collaboration. That doesn't mean losing your individuality. It means allowing your individuality to strengthen your partnerships rather than compete with them. Now let's look at how these eclipses activate this story. The August 12th, 2026 solar eclipse in Leo lands directly in your first house. This is one of the most personal eclipses you'll experience. It marks a major reset of identity. You may redefine who you are, change how you present yourself, release outdated roles, or make important decisions that alter the direction of your life. And then just weeks later, the August 28th eclipse continues helping you close the financial and emotional lessons of the Virgo Pisces cycle that began back in January 2025. Then on February 6, 2027, the Aquarius Solar Eclipse activates your seventh house once again. This becomes a powerful new beginning for relationships, partnerships, contracts, and the people you're choosing to build your future alongside you. And then the February 20th eclipse continues completing the story in the Virgo Pisces axis that you've been navigating since January 2025. Now, by August 2nd, 2027, another solar eclipse in Leo becomes one of the biggest release points of the cycle. This may coincide with letting go of another layer of identity, confidence, or self definition that has simply run its course. Then on August 17th, 2027, there's a Leo Aquarius lunar eclipse, which brings an emotional culmination across your first and seventh houses. And this is where you clearly see the balance between your individuality and your relationships, between independence and partnership, between self expression and mutual support. Throughout this cycle, there are several major planetary alignments that deepen these themes. November 2026 may amplify relationship dynamics. Existing patterns within partnerships may become impossible to ignore. Healthy relationships can deepen significantly, while unhealthy dynamics may demand change. By April 2027, Saturn helps stabilize what is truly worth building. Commitments become stronger, relationships become clearer, and mature decisions become easier to make. Then in late 2027, especially as Pluto joins the North Node in Aquarius, relationships become agents of profound transformation. The people entering your life now or the evolution happening within existing partnerships have the potential to completely reshape your future, not through dependency, but through conscious partnership. And throughout this entire cycle, there are questions worth sitting with. What began shifting around February 17th, 2026? What relationships have started changing? What are you becoming? Where have you built your identity around proving yourself instead of simply being yourself? Where are you resisting support because independence feels safer? Where are you being invited to collaborate instead of carrying everything alone? And what kinds of relationships truly reflect the person you're growing into? Because, Leo, this is your shift from defining yourself alone to growing alongside others, from protecting an outdated identity to discovering a more authentic one, from proving your strength to allowing connection to become part of your strength. And as we close this out, remember this. The past couple of years have been helping you transform your relationship with money, trust, vulnerability, and emotional security. Now, the cycle is asking you to transform your relationships and your identity, to release old versions of yourself that no longer fit, to welcome partnerships that align with your future, and to understand that your light doesn't become smaller when you share it with others. It becomes more meaningful because the South Node in your first house is clearing away outdated identities. So the North Node in your seventh house can help you build relationships, partnerships, and connections that support the next chapter of your life. Virgo, welcome to one of the most meaningful inner transformation cycles you're going to experience over the next couple of years. From July 26, 2026 to March 26, 2028, the lunar nodes move into Leo and Aquarius, activating your sixth house of work, health, routines, and daily responsibilities, and your 12th house of rest, healing, spirituality, endings, and the unconscious. This is where major endings and major beginnings are unfolding in your life. For you, this is a cycle of learning how to balance doing with simply being. It's about recognizing that productivity alone isn't what creates a meaningful life. True growth comes when your external responsibilities and your inner world begin working together instead of competing with one another. Leo rules your 12th house, so this is the part of your chart connected to what happens behind the scenes. It governs solitude, retreat, spiritual development, subconscious patterns, hidden fears, old grief, and the endings that quietly prepare you for a new beginning. As the South Node moves into this part of your chart, life begins clearing away emotional baggage, unconscious habits, and chapters that have quietly been coming to an end. At the same time, Aquarius rules your sixth house, and this is your daily work, your health, your routines, your habits, your coworkers, and the practical systems that support your everyday life. With the North Node moving through this space, this is where life is asking you to evolve. So the cycle is asking you to move from carrying the weight of the past into creating a healthier, more intentional way of living in the present. But the story didn't begin in July. If you go back to February 17th, 2026, there was a solar eclipse in Aquarius in your sixth house. That eclipse was the first initiation into this new chapter. You may have started a new job, changed your schedule, became more aware of your health, or realized that your daily life needed to function differently. For some of you, this may have been the beginning of new habits or new responsibilities. Others may have recognized that burnout, overwork, or unhealthy routines could no longer continue. That eclipse planted a seed. Now, as the lunar nodes officially move into Leo and Aquarius, those changes begin to gather momentum. At the same time, you're also bringing another major chapter to completion. Since January 2025, the Virgo and Pisces eclipse cycle has been unfolding across your first and seventh houses. This has been one of the most personal eclipse cycles you've experienced. Over the past couple of years, you've been redefining who you are and how you relate to other people. You may have experienced changes in your identity, your appearance, your confidence, your relationships, or the balance between your own needs and the needs of others. Some relationships may have deepened, others may have naturally come to an end. You've been learning healthier boundaries, discovering more authentic ways of showing up, and understanding that the strongest relationships are built between two whole people, not through self sacrifice or perfectionism. Those lessons are still being completed through the end of 2026 and into 2027. This creates a bridge between two very different stories. One chapter has been helping you redefine yourself and your relationships. The next chapter asks you to redefine how you live your everyday life. Now let's talk about what's changing. With the South Node moving through your 12th house, there is a release happening beneath the surface. This isn't always dramatic. In fact, much of this process happens quietly behind the scenes. Old fears begin losing their grip. Hidden emotional patterns rise into your awareness. Habits of overthinking, self criticism, guilt, or carrying responsibilities that were never truly yours may begin to dissolve. For many Virgo risings, this can also become a powerful period for therapy, spiritual practice, healing work, meditation, or simply creating more space to process your emotions. You may find yourself needing more rest than usual. You may feel called to spend more time alone, not because you're withdrawing from life, but because your soul is making room for something new. This is also a really beautiful cycle for releasing unconscious patterns that have quietly shaped your decisions for years. The more willing you are to let go of what no longer serves you, the lighter you'll feel moving forward. Now, at the same time, the North Node is pulling you into your sixth house, and this is where your future is being built. You're being asked to create healthier systems, healthier habits, healthier routines, healthier ways of managing your time and your energy. And this isn't about becoming busier, it's about becoming more intentional. For some of you, this could mean changing careers or taking on new responsibilities that better align with your long term goals. For others, it may involve making meaningful improvements to your physical health, mental health, or work life balance. Aquarius also rules innovation. So you may begin using technology, new systems, AI, or unconventional approaches to make your work more efficient or to support your daily life in ways you hadn't considered before. The lesson here is not simply to work harder, it's to work smarter, to build routines that actually support the life you're trying to create. Now let's go over the eclipse activations of this story. The August 12th, 2026 solar eclipse in Leo falls in your 12th house. This becomes a powerful release point. Old emotional chapters, subconscious fears, unhealthy coping mechanisms, or situations that have quietly run their course may finally come to an end. This is a deeply healing eclipse, even if it initially feels uncertain. Then, just a couple weeks later, on August 28th, this continues bringing closure to the identity and relationship lessons that have been unfolding since January 2025. Then on February 6th, 2027, we have the solar eclipse in Aquarius, which is activating your sixth house once again. And this is a powerful new beginning around your work, your health, your habits, and your everyday life. New routines emerge, new opportunities appear, and you begin creating a lifestyle that reflects the person you're becoming. Then on February 20th, we have that final eclipse in the Virgo Pisces axis, closing out the changes that have taken place in your first and seventh houses. This is helping you integrate everything you've learned about yourself and your relationships. Then as we move through 2027, the cycle deepens. On August 2nd, 2027, we have a solar eclipse in your 12th house, which becomes one of the biggest release points of the entire cycle. This may feel like the final closing of a long chapter. A burden that you've carried for years may finally be lifted. Then on August 17th, 2027, the Leo Aquarius lunar eclipse brings an emotional culmination across your sixth and your 12th houses. And this is where you clearly see the balance between your work and rest, service and surrender, productivity and healing, the life you manage on the outside and the life you nurture within. Throughout this cycle, several planetary alignments also deepen these themes. November 2026 may bring greater awareness around burnout, hidden stress, or responsibilities that have become unsustainable. It becomes easier to recognize where your energy has been leaking. And then by April 2027, Saturn helps you establish healthier structures, making it easier to commit to routines and responsibilities that genuinely support your growth. And then during late 2027, especially as Pluto joins the North Node, there could be profound transformation in your work, your health, and the systems that shape your daily life. You may completely change how you approach your career, your schedule, or even your definition of productivity. And throughout this cycle, there are important questions really to reflect on. What began shifting around February 17th, 2026? What changes started to unfold in your work and your daily routines? What have you been learning about yourself and your relationships since January 2025? What emotional burdens are you finally ready to release? Where are you staying busy to avoid slowing down? Where would healthier routines create more freedom instead of less? How can you care for your body and your mind with greater compassion? And what kind of everyday life actually supports the future you're trying to build? Virgo, this is your shift from carrying invisible burdens to creating sustainable systems, from constant productivity to purposeful living, from surviving each day to building a life that truly nourishes you. And as we close this out, remember this. The past couple of years have been helping you redefine yourself and your relationships. Now, this cycle is asking you to redefine how you care for yourself every single day, to release old emotional weight, to build healthier habits, to trust that rest is not a distraction from your purpose. It's part of your purpose because the South Node in your 12th house is quietly clearing the past. So the North Node in your 6th house can help you build healthier routines, meaningful work, and a daily life that supports the future you're becoming. Libra, welcome to one of the most exciting and creatively fulfilling cycles you're going to experience over the next couple of years. From July 26, 2026 to March 26, 2028, the lunar nodes move into Leo and Aquarius, activating your fifth house of creativity, romance, joy, children, and authentic self expression, and your 11th house of friendships, communities, long term goals, and the future you're building. This is where major endings and major beginnings start to unfold in your life. For you, this cycle is about rediscovering what truly brings your heart to life while also finding the people, communities, and shared vision that support that joy. It's about moving from seeking belonging through the expectations of a group into expressing yourself authentically, while also recognizing that your gifts become even more meaningful when they're shared with the right people. Leo rules your 11th house. This is the part of your chart connected to friendships, social circles, organizations, communities, professional networks, online spaces, and your hopes for the future. As the South Node moves through this house, life begins clearing away friendships, communities, and long term visions that no longer align with the person you're becoming. At the same time, Aquarius rules your 5th house. And this is your creativity, your passions, your romantic life, your children, your hobbies, and the unique way you express yourself. Well, the North Node is moving through this part of your chart. This is where life is asking you to grow. So the cycle is asking you to move from defining yourself through where you belong toward discovering what genuinely lights you up from within. But the story didn't just start in July. If you go back to February 17th, 2026, there was a solar eclipse in Aquarius in your 5th house. That eclipse was the first initiation into the story. For some of you, it may have sparked a new creative project or awakened a talent that has been sitting dormant. Others may have experienced a new romantic connection, changes involving children, or simply a realization that life was asking you to create, play, and express yourself in a completely different way. For some of you, that eclipse planted a question. What would my life look like if I stopped living according to everyone else's expectations and started creating from my own authentic heart? That was the seed. Now, as the lunar nodes officially enter Leo and Aquarius, that seed begins to grow. At the same time, however, another important chapter is still coming to completion. Since January 2025, the Virgo and Pisces axis and eclipse cycle has been activating your 12th and 6th houses. Over the past couple of years, you've been learning powerful lessons around rest, healing, boundaries, health, work, and your daily routines. You actually may have become more aware of burnout, emotional exhaustion, unconscious patterns or habits that quietly drained your energy. At the same time, you've likely been creating healthier routines, improving your work life balance, or learning how to care for yourself more consistently. Those lessons are still wrapping up through the final Virgo and Pisces eclipses in 2026 and early 2027. So this creates a bridge. One chapter has been helping you heal and build healthier foundations. Now, the next chapter asks you to rediscover joy, creativity, and the future you truly want to create. Now, let's talk about what's changing. With the South Node moving through your 11th house, there is a release happening around your communities, friendships, and long term aspirations. This doesn't necessarily mean you're losing friends, but you may begin noticing that certain friendships or relationships no longer resonate the way they once did. Some friendships may naturally drift apart. Some communities may no longer reflect your values. You may even outgrow goals you've been pursuing for years because they were built around who you used to be rather than who you're becoming. And this cycle also invites you to examine your relationship with approval from groups or social circles. Have you been making choices because they genuinely reflect you or because they help you fit in? Have you been sacrificing your individuality to maintain harmony? As a Libra rising, connection is deeply important to you. But the cycle reminds you that authentic relationships can only be built when you're willing to show people who you really are. At the same time, the North Node is pulling you into your fifth house. This is where life becomes more vibrant. You're being guided toward creativity, toward romance, toward play, toward joy, toward remembering what it feels like to create simply because your heart wants to. For some of you, this could bring the beginning of a meaningful romantic relationship. For others, it may awaken a creative passion, inspire you to share your talents, or bring important developments involving children or family planning. Aquarius adds an unconventional quality to all of this. Your creativity may flourish through technology, online platforms, social media, or collaborative innovation. You may find yourself expressing your gifts in ways you never imagined before. The invitation is to stop asking, will people approve this? And start asking, does this feel true to me? Now let's look at how the eclipses activate this story. The August 12th, 2026 solar eclipse in Leo lands in your 11th house. This becomes a major reset around friendships, communities, networking, and your long term goals. Some social chapters may come to an end. Some dreams may evolve, and space begins opening more aligned connections. Then, just a couple of weeks later, the August 28th eclipse continues helping you close the healing and lifestyle lessons that have been unfolding since January 2025. By February 6, 2027, the Aquarius Solar Eclipse activates your fifth house once again. And this is a beautiful new beginning for creativity, romance, children, and authentic self expression. You may feel more inspired than you have in years. Projects you've only imagined may finally begin taking shape. The February 20th eclipse continues completing your 6th and 12th house story, helping you release the final layers of burnout, overwork, or emotional exhaustion. And then we move further into 2027 and the cycle deepens. The August 2nd, 2027 solar eclipse in your 11th house becomes one of the biggest release points of the entire cycle. A friendship, community, organization, or long term goal may reach its natural conclusion. Not because you failed, because you've grown. Then on August 17th, 2027, the Leo Aquarius lunar eclipse brings an emotional culmination across your 5th and 11th houses. And this is where you clearly see the balance between expressing yourself as an individual and contributing to something larger, between creating for approval and creating for joy, between fitting in and fully belonging. Throughout this cycle, several important planetary alignments deepen these themes. November 2026 may amplify dynamics within friendships or social groups. Certain alliances may become stronger while others reveal where they've outlived their purpose. By April 2027, Saturn helps you build more meaningful creative projects and more mature relationships with the communities you choose to invest in. Then, during late 2027, especially as Pluto joins the North Node in Aquarius, there is profound transformation in your creative life and your relationship with self expression. You may discover talents, passions, or even life purposes that have been quietly waiting to emerge. Throughout this cycle, there's really important questions to reflect on. What began shifting around February 17th, 2026? What creative spark or romantic possibility first appeared? What friendship or communities are beginning to feel complete? Where have you been seeking approval instead of expressing yourself authentically? What brings you genuine joy, even if no one else is watching? Who encourages you to become more fully yourself? And what future becomes possible when you stop performing for acceptance and start creating from your heart? Libra, this is your shift from fitting in to standing out through authenticity, from seeking approval to expressing your truth, from following someone else's vision to creating your own. And as we close this out, remember this. The past couple of years have been helping you heal, establish healthier routines, and release patterns that quietly drained your energy. Now, the cycle is asking you to rediscover joy, to embrace your creativity, to welcome love that celebrates who you truly are, to build a future that reflects your authentic heart instead of other people's expectations. Because the South Node in your 11th house is clearing away friendships, communities, and dreams that no longer fit your path. So the North Node in your 5th house can awaken your creativity, your joy, your courage to express yourself, and the life your heart has been waiting to create. Scorpio, welcome to one of the most significant turning points in your life over the next couple of years. From July 26, 2026 to March 26, 2028, the lunar nodes move into Leo and Aquarius, activating your 4th house of home, family, emotional foundation, and private life, and your 10th house of career, purpose, reputation, and the legacy you're building in the world. This is where major endings and major beginnings start to unfold for you. For you, this is one of the most pivotal axes in the birth chart. It represents the balance between your inner world and your outer world. It asks where you feel rooted, what gives you a sense of security, and how that foundation supports the direction your life is meant to take. Leo rules your 10th house. This is your career, your public image, your achievements, your reputation, your leadership, and the role you're known for in the world. As the South Node moves into this part of your chart, there is a clearing happening around your public life and the way you've defined success. At the same time, Aquarius rules your 4th house. This is your home, your family, your ancestry, your emotional well-being, and the life you build behind closed doors. With the North Node moving into this part of your chart, this is where life is asking you to grow. So this cycle is asking you to move from chasing external achievement alone toward creating a life that feels emotionally sustainable from the inside out. But the story didn't begin in July. If you go back to February 17th, 2026, there was a solar eclipse in Aquarius in your 4th house. That eclipse was your first initiation into this new chapter. For some of you, this may have brought changes within your home, your family. You may have moved, begun thinking about relocating, welcomed changes within your household, or started healing longstanding family dynamics. For others, the shift was more internal. You may have realized that your definition of security was changing. What once felt like home may no longer have felt emotionally supportive, and you may have sensed that a new foundation was beginning to form. That eclipse planted the seed. Now, as the lunar nodes officially move into Leo and Aquarius, that seed begins to grow. At the same time, another chapter is still reaching its conclusion. Since January 2025, the Virgo and Pisces eclipse cycle has been activating your 11th and 5th houses. Over the past couple of years, you've been learning about friendships, community, creativity, romance, children, and the balance between your individual passions and your place within a larger group. Some friendships may have naturally come to an end. New communities may have appeared. Your creative voice may have evolved, and you've likely gained greater clarity around the people who truly support your growth. Those lessons are still wrapping up through the final Virgo and Pisces eclipses in 2026 and early 2027. This means you're standing between two important stories. One chapter has been teaching you who you want beside you, and the next chapter asks where you truly want to build your life. Now let's talk about what's changing. With the South Node moving through your 10th house, there is a release happening around your career, public identity, and your ambitions. This doesn't necessarily mean you're leaving your career, but it does mean that you're examining the reasons behind what you've been working toward. Have you been chasing success because it genuinely fulfills you or because it validates you? Have you been carrying responsibilities that no longer align with your deeper values? Have you built an identity around achievement while quietly neglecting your emotional needs? For some Scorpios, career changes may absolutely occur during this cycle. Promotions, leadership shifts, changes in professional direction, or even stepping away from a role that no longer fits are all possible manifestations. For others, the change is more internal. Your definitions of success begin to evolve. Recognition may become less important than purpose. Status may become less meaningful than peace. And this isn't about giving up your ambitions. It's about making sure your ambitions are building a life you actually want to live. At the same time, the North Node is guiding you toward your fourth house. This is where your future is quietly taking shape. You're being called to strengthen your emotional foundation, to create a home that supports your well being, to heal family patterns, to reconnect with your roots while also creating new traditions that reflect the life you're building now. For some of you, this could involve moving, purchasing a home, renovating your living space, or spending more time with family. For others, this is deeply emotional work, learning to feel safe within yourself, healing childhood experiences, creating stability that doesn't depend entirely on external accomplishments. Aquarius brings an unconventional quality to this process. Your idea of home may look different than what you once imagined. You may create family in non-traditional ways, relocate somewhere unexpected, or build a lifestyle that gives you greater freedom and authenticity. The lesson isn't simply to slow down. It's to recognize that your outer success will always be stronger when it's supported by inner stability. Now let's look at how the eclipses activate this story. The August 12th, 2026 solar eclipse in Leo lands in your 10th house. This becomes a major reset around your career, public image, leadership, and life direction. Some professional chapters may come to an end. Others may begin. Either way, life is asking you to release outdated definitions of success. Then, just a couple of weeks later, the eclipse on August 28th continues helping you complete the friendship and creativity lessons that have been unfolding since January 2025. By February 6, 2027, the Aquarius Solar Eclipse activates your fourth house once again. This becomes a powerful new beginning around home, family, emotional security, and the foundation you're building for your future. The February 20th eclipse continues completing your 5th and 11th house story, helping you integrate everything you've learned about joy, community, and authentic connection. Then we move into 2027 and the cycle deepens. The August 2nd, 2027 solar eclipse in your 10th house becomes one of the biggest release points of the entire cycle. A career path, leadership role, professional identity, or long-term ambition may reach its natural conclusion, not because you're losing direction, but because you're finding a more authentic one. Then on August 12th, 2027, the Leo Aquarius lunar eclipse brings an emotional culmination across your 4th and 10th houses. This is where you clearly see the balance between your private life and your public life, between achievement and fulfillment, between what the world expects from you and what your soul actually needs. And throughout this cycle, several important planetary alignments deepen these themes. November 2026 may amplify career matters, bringing greater visibility while also exposing areas where your ambitions have become unsustainable or disconnected from your emotional needs. By April 2027, Saturn helps you create stronger structures in both your professional and personal life. Decisions made during this period have the potential to support you for years to come. Then during late 2027, especially as Pluto joins the North Node in Aquarius, there is a profound transformation around your emotional foundations, your family story, and the life you're building behind the scenes. You may completely redefine what home means to you. And through all of this, there are important questions to truly reflect on. What began shifting around February 17th, 2026? What changes started unfolding in your home and family life? What friendships, creative projects, or communities have been evolving since January 2025? Where have you attached your identity to achievement? Where are you building a life that looks successful but doesn't necessarily feel fulfilling? What gives you a genuine sense of emotional security? And what kind of foundation do you want your future to stand upon? Because this is your shift, Scorpio, from external success to inner fulfillment, from chasing recognition to creating true security, from building a career to building a life. And as we close this out, remember this. The past couple of years have been helping you redefine your friendships, your creativity, and the people who truly belong in your future. Now, this cycle is asking you to create a stronger foundation beneath everything you're building, to release outdated ambitions that no longer reflect your values, to heal your relationship with home, family, and emotional security, and to understand that the greatest legacy you can build isn't just what you accomplish. It's the life you create that allows you to genuinely thrive. Because the South Node in your 10th house is clearing away outdated definitions of success. So the North Node in your 4th house can help you build a home, a foundation, and an inner sense of security that supports every chapter still waiting to unfold. Sagittarius, welcome to one of the most expansive and perspective changing cycles you're going to experience over the next couple of years. From July 26, 2026 to March 26, 2028, the lunar nodes move into Leo and Aquarius, activating your 3rd house of communication, learning, siblings, daily environment, and the way you process information. And your 9th house of higher education, travel, beliefs, spirituality, publishing, and your broader vision for your life. This is where major endings and major beginnings are unfolding in your life. For you, this cycle is about reshaping the way you think so you can reshape the direction of your life. It's about moving away from rigid beliefs or identities that have defined your worldview and becoming more curious, adaptable, and open to learning from the world around you. Leo rules your 9th house, and this is your philosophy, your belief systems, your relationship with truth, higher education, long distance travel, spirituality, and your search for meaning. As the South Node moves through this part of your chart, there is a clearing happening around old beliefs, outdated worldviews, and life philosophies that no longer fit who you're becoming. At the same time, Aquarius rules your 3rd house. This is your communication, your thinking patterns, your daily conversations, your writing, your learning style, your siblings, your neighbors, and the immediate environment that shapes your everyday experiences. With the North Node moving through this part of your chart, this is where life is asking you to grow. So the cycle is asking you to move from believing you already have all the answers toward becoming a lifelong student who remains curious, flexible, and open to new perspectives. But the story didn't just begin in July. If you go back to February 17th, 2026, there was a solar eclipse in Aquarius in your 3rd house. That eclipse was the first initiation into this new chapter. For some of you, it may have sparked a new way of communicating or learning. You may have started writing, teaching, creating content, studying something new, or becoming more involved in your local community. Others may have experienced changes involving siblings, neighbors, or their daily routines. You may have found yourself having conversations that challenged your thinking or opened your mind to possibilities you hadn't considered before. That eclipse planted the seed. Now, as the lunar nodes officially move into Leo and Aquarius, that seed begins to grow. At the same time, another important story is still coming to a close. Since January 2025, the Virgo and Pisces eclipse cycle has been activating your 10th and 4th houses. Over the past couple of years, you've been redefining your career, your public role, your home life, and your emotional foundation. You may have experienced changes in your professional direction, shifts within your family, or a deeper understanding of what success and security truly mean. Some of you may have been balancing growing responsibilities with the need to create a stronger personal foundation. Others have realized that external success means very little if your inner life isn't equally supported. Those lessons are still wrapping up through the final Virgo and Pisces eclipses in 2026 and early 2027. So this creates a bridge. One chapter has been helping you redefine where you're building your life, and now the next chapter asks you to redefine how you understand your life. Now let's talk about what's changing. With the South Node moving through your 9th house, there is a release happening around your beliefs and your worldview. This doesn't mean you'll stop learning or stop seeking truth. Quite the opposite, actually. It means life is asking you to let go of certainty where certainty has become limiting. You may realize that beliefs you've held for years no longer resonate. You may question teachings, philosophies, or spiritual paths that once felt absolute. Some of you may complete a chapter involving higher education or internal travel. Others may discover that the version of success or purpose you once chased is evolving into something much more authentic. This can also be a period where your relationship with religion, spirituality, or personal truth becomes more nuanced. Rather than looking for one answer, you're learning to hold space for complexity. Sagittarius, this is actually a profound lesson. Your natural gift is seeking meaning. This cycle reminds you that meaning continues to evolve as you do. At the same time, the North Node is guiding you toward your third house, and this is where your future begins taking shape. You're being encouraged to ask more questions, to listen more deeply, to engage in meaningful conversations, to share your voice, to write, to teach, to learn practical skills, to become more connected to your everyday environment instead of always searching for the next distant horizon. Aquarius brings innovation into this house. Many of you may begin using technology, digital platforms, AI, or new forms of communication in ways that expand your reach and your influence. You may discover that your voice has the power to educate, connect, and inspire others. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're willing to keep learning. Now let's look at how the eclipses activate this story. The August 12th, 2026 lunar eclipse in Leo lands in your ninth house. This becomes a major reset around your beliefs, education, travel, spirituality, publishing, or a long term vision for your future. Some beliefs may come to an end, new ones begin to emerge. And then just a couple of weeks later, on August 28th, this eclipse continues to help you complete the career and family lessons that have been unfolding since January 2025. By February 6, 2027, the Aquarius Solar Eclipse activates your third house once again. And this is a powerful new beginning around communication, learning, writing, networking, teaching, and sharing your ideas. Then the February 20th eclipse continues completing your 10th and 4th house story, helping you integrate everything you've learned about your career, home, and emotional security. Then we move into 2027 and the cycle deepens. The August 2nd, 2027 solar eclipse in your ninth house becomes one of the biggest release points of the entire cycle. A worldview, educational path, belief system, or a life philosophy may naturally come to completion, not because you've stopped growing, but because you're growing beyond it. Then on August 17th, 2027, the Leo Aquarius lunar eclipse brings an emotional culmination across your third and ninth houses. This is where you clearly see the balance between knowledge and wisdom, between speaking and listening, between what you believe and what you're still discovering. Throughout this cycle, several important planetary alignments deepen these themes. November 2026 may amplify conversations around your beliefs, your education, or your long term vision, revealing where pride or certainty may be limiting your growth. By April 2027, Saturn helps you build practical structures around learning, communication, and teaching. What you've been studying or developing begins taking a more concrete form. Then, during late 2027, especially as Pluto joins the North Node in Aquarius, there is a profound transformation in your voice, your thinking, and the way you communicate with the world. You may completely change how you share your ideas, build your platform, or contribute to important conversations. And throughout this cycle, there are important questions to really reflect on. What began shifting around February 17th, 2026? What new conversations, ideas, or learning opportunities start opening? What have you been redefining in your career and home life since January 2025? Where are your beliefs becoming too rigid? Where are you being invited to stay curious instead of needing certainty? How can you use your voice to educate and connect rather than simply persuade? What practical knowledge could help you build the future you're envisioning? And what happens when you allow your understanding of the world to continue evolving? Sagittarius, this is your shift from certainty to curiosity, from distant horizons to meaningful conversations, from holding tightly to old beliefs to remaining open to new possibilities. As we close this out, remember this. The past couple of years have been helping you redefine your career, your home, and the foundation you're building your life upon. Now, the cycle is asking you to expand your mind in a different way, to release outdated beliefs, to strengthen your voice, to embrace learning as a lifelong journey, and to understand that wisdom isn't found by having every answer. It's found by remaining willing to ask better questions. Because the South Node in your ninth house is clearing away outdated beliefs and philosophies. So the North Node in your third house can help you develop a more curious mind, a more authentic voice, and deeper connections with the people and conversations that will shape your future. Capricorn, welcome to one of the most transformative cycles you're going to experience over the next couple of years. From July 26, 2026 to March 26, 2028, the lunar nodes move into Leo and Aquarius, activating your second house of income, self worth, personal resources, and values, and your eighth house of shared resources, intimacy, psychological transformation, healing, and profound life changes. This is where major endings and major beginnings start to unfold in your life. For you, this cycle is about redefining what true security means. It's about moving beyond relying solely on what you own, what you've built, or what you can control, and learning to trust deeper forms of support, vulnerability, and transformation. This is one of the most powerful financial and emotional axes in your chart. And by the end of this cycle, you're likely to have a very different understanding of both your resources and yourself. Capricorn Leo rules your eighth house, and this is the house of shared finances, investments, taxes, inheritance, business, partnerships, emotional intimacy, trust, and the deep psychological changes that shape your life. As the South Node moves through this part of your chart, there's a clearing happening around old emotional attachments, unhealthy power dynamics, fears of vulnerability, and financial situations that have run their course. At the same time, Aquarius rules your second house. This is your income, your talents, your possessions, your values, and your relationship with self worth. With the North Node moving through this part of your chart, this is where life is asking you to grow. So the cycle is asking you to move from depending on what others can provide toward building a stronger sense of personal value, independence, and sustainable security. But the story didn't just begin in July. If you go back to February 17th, 2026, there was a solar eclipse in Aquarius in your second house. That eclipse was your first initiation into this new chapter. For some of you, it may have marked the beginning of a new income source, a career opportunity, or a shift in how you earn your money. Others may have started questioning what they truly value or realize that their definition of success was beginning to change. Some of you may have discovered talents that have been overlooked for years, while others began thinking more seriously about long-term financial stability. That eclipse planted the seed. Now, as the lunar nodes officially move into Leo and Aquarius, that seed begins to grow. At the same time, another important chapter is still coming to a close. Since January 2025, the Virgo and Pisces eclipse cycle has been activating your ninth and your third houses. Over the past couple of years, you've been expanding your beliefs, learning new skills, questioning old perspectives, and changing the way you communicate with the world. Some of you may have traveled, pursued education, or completely shifted your outlook on life. Others may have redefined the way you share ideas, connect with your community, or process information. Those lessons are still wrapping up through the final Virgo and Pisces eclipses in 2026 and early 2027. This creates a bridge. One chapter has been expanding your perspective, and now the next chapter is asking you to build a more secure future based on those new insights. Now let's talk about what's changing for you. With the South Node moving through your eighth house, there is a release happening around your shared resources and emotional patterns. For some of you, this may involve paying off debt, restructuring investments, or changing financial agreements with another person. For others, this could be deeply emotional. Old fears around trust, vulnerability, loss, or dependence may begin surfacing so they can finally be healed. You may also realize that you've been carrying emotional weight that was never truly yours to hold. You may become more aware of relationship dynamics that revolve around control, obligation, or unequal exchanges. The cycle asks you to examine where you've been giving your power away and where you've been afraid to claim it. It also encourages deep psychological healing. Therapy, shadow work, spiritual growth, and honest conversations about intimacy can all become incredibly meaningful during this period. This isn't about avoiding transformation. It's about recognizing that true empowerment often comes after your willingness to release what you've outgrown. At the same time, the North Node is pulling you toward your second house, and this is where your future is being built. You are being encouraged to strengthen your finances, develop your talents, increase your confidence, and create a more stable foundation for yourself. And this doesn't necessarily mean becoming wealthy overnight. It means building something sustainable. You may discover new ways to earn income. You may recognize skills you've underestimated. You may become more intentional about your spending, your investments, and the values that guide your decisions. Aquarius brings innovation into this part of your chart. Many Capricorn risings may embrace new technologies, digital platforms, or unconventional business opportunities that help them build financial independence in ways they hadn't previously considered. This is about creating security that reflects the future rather than the past. Now let's look at how the eclipses activate this story. The August 12th, 2026 solar eclipse in Leo lands in your eighth house. This becomes a major reset around shared finances, intimacy, emotional healing, and transformation. Old financial agreements may end. Old emotional patterns may finally be released. This eclipse clears space for a healthier relationship with trust and shared responsibilities. And then just a couple of weeks later, on August 28th, we continue to complete the cycle around learning and communication and belief systems and all of that energy that you've been in since January 2025. By February 6, 2027, the Aquarius solar eclipse activates your second house once again. And this is a powerful new beginning around income, personal resources, confidence, and self worth. New financial opportunities may emerge. You may begin building something that provides long term stability. And then the February 20th eclipse continues to complete that story playing out in your third and ninth houses. So you're being helped to integrate everything that you've learned since January 2025 around communication, education, and your worldview. And then as we move further into 2027, the cycle deepens. The August 2nd, 2027 solar eclipse in your eighth house becomes one of the biggest release points of the entire cycle. A financial chapter, emotional attachment, or a psychological pattern may finally come to completion, not because something is being taken away, but because you're becoming stronger without really needing to carry it. Then on August 17th, 2027, the Leo Aquarius lunar eclipse brings an emotional culmination across your second and eighth houses. And this is where you clearly see the balance between what belongs to you and what you're meant to share, between independence and trust, between self reliance and healthy interdependence. Throughout this cycle, several important planetary alignments deepen these themes. November 2026 may amplify financial and emotional matters, revealing where old patterns around power, control, or dependence are ready to be transformed. By April 2027, Saturn helps you create practical financial structures and make mature decisions that strengthen your long term security. Then during late 2027, especially as Pluto joins the North Node in Aquarius, there is a profound transformation in your relationship with money, values, and self worth. You may completely redefine what success means to you. And throughout this cycle, there are important questions to truly reflect on. What began shifting around February 17th, 2026? What changes started unfolding around your finances or your sense of value? What have you been learning about communication, education, or your beliefs since January 2025? Where are you relying on others in ways that keep you from recognizing your own strength? Where are you holding on to fears around vulnerability or trust? And what talents are waiting to be developed? What does genuine security look like for you now? And how can you build a life that reflects your values instead of your fears? Capricorn, this is your shift from dependence to self worth, from fear to empowerment, from surviving emotional cycles to creating lasting stability. And as we close this out, remember this: the past couple of years have been helping you expand your mind, refine your voice, and discover new ways of understanding the world. Now, the cycle's asking you to strengthen your foundation, to release emotional and financial patterns that no longer serve you, to recognize your own value, and to build a future where your sense of security comes from within as much as it does from what you've created. Because the South Node in your eighth house is clearing away outdated emotional attachments and shared financial patterns. So the North Node in your second house can help you build lasting confidence, stronger self worth, sustainable resources, and a future that truly reflects your values. Aquarius, welcome to one of the most defining relationship cycles you're going to experience over the next couple of years. From July 26, 2026 to March 26, 2028, the lunar nodes move into Leo and Aquarius, activating your first house of identity, independence, personal direction, and the way you move through the world. And also your seventh house of relationships, partnerships, commitments, and the people you choose to build your life with. This is where major endings and major beginnings are beginning to unfold in your life. For you, this is one of the most personal and visible nodal cycles because it activates the axis of self and others. By the end of this journey, you're likely to feel like a different person than the one who began it. Your identity is evolving, and because your identity is changing, your relationships naturally have to evolve alongside you. Leo rules your seventh house, and this is the house of marriage, committed relationships, business partnerships, contracts, clients, and every significant one on one connection in your life. As the South Node moves through this part of your chart, there is a clearing happening around relationship patterns that no longer reflect who you're becoming. At the same time, Aquarius rules your first house, and this is your identity, your appearance, your confidence, your personal goals, and the way you initiate new chapters in your life. With the North Node moving through your first house, this is where life is asking you to grow. So the cycle is asking you to move from defining yourself through the expectations of others toward becoming more fully aligned with your authentic identity. But the story didn't just begin in July. If you go back to February 17th, 2026, there was a solar eclipse in Aquarius in your first house, and that eclipse was your first initiation into this story. For some of you, this may have coincided with a major personal realization. You may have started changing your appearance, your priorities, your goals, or simply recognizing that you could no longer continue living according to an old version of yourself. Some of you may have felt a powerful desire for independence. Others may have realized that it was finally time to pursue a path that felt more authentic, even if it meant disappointing people who were comfortable with the old version of you. That eclipse planted the seed. Now, as the lunar nodes officially move into Leo and Aquarius, that seed begins to take shape. At the same time, another important story is still coming to completion. Since January 2025, the Virgo and Pisces eclipse cycle has been activating your eighth house and your second houses. These are your money houses. Over the past couple of years, you've been learning profound lessons about money, shared resources, emotional intimacy, trust, self worth, and security. You may have restructured your finances, worked through emotional fears around dependence or vulnerability, or transformed the way you value yourself. Those lessons are still wrapping up through the final Virgo and Pisces eclipses in 2026 and early 2027. So this creates a bridge. One chapter has been helping you strengthen your relationship with security and self worth. Now, the next chapter is asking you to strengthen your relationship with yourself. Now, let's talk about what's changing for you. With the South Node moving through your seventh house, there's a release happening around your relationships. And this doesn't automatically mean relationships end. For some people, the cycle does coincide with important endings because certain partnerships have simply just run their course. But for many of you, this is about releasing unhealthy relationship dynamics or patterns rather than the relationship itself. You may begin noticing where you've compromised too much, where you've shaped yourself around someone else's expectations, where you've prioritized keeping the peace instead of honoring your truth, where you've relied on validation from others instead of trusting yourself. Existing partnerships may become stronger if both people are willing to grow together. But if a relationship has been built on imbalance, performance, or outdated expectations, this cycle asks for honesty. The South Node doesn't remove healthy Leo qualities, it clears distorted ones. So if relationships have revolved around pride, ego, control, drama, or needing constant validation, those patterns are ready to be released. At the same time, the North Node is guiding you toward your first house, and this is where your future begins. You're being asked to become more independent, more authentic, more comfortable trusting your own instincts. This isn't about becoming isolated. It's about recognizing that healthy relationships begin with a healthy relationship to yourself. You may discover new interests. You may change your appearance. You may step into leadership roles. You may become much clearer about what you want and equally clear about what you don't want. Aquarius encourages individuality. It reminds you that your uniqueness is not something to hide. It's something to contribute. The more authentic you become, the more naturally you attract people who genuinely align with your path. Now let's look at how the eclipses activate this story. The August 12th, 2026 solar eclipse in Leo lands in your seventh house. And this becomes a major reset around relationships, partnerships, contracts, and commitments. Some partnerships may evolve, some may conclude. New standards begin replacing old expectations. Then, just a couple of weeks later, on August 28th, this continues to help complete the financial and emotional healing lessons that have been unfolding since January 2025. And then February 6, 2027, we have another Aquarius solar eclipse activating your first house once again. And this becomes one of the most powerful personal new beginnings you'll experience. A new version of you begins emerging with greater confidence, clarity, and authenticity. And then on February 20th, that is the final eclipse in the Virgo Pisces axis, closing out that entire story and cycle around your money, security, trust, and self-worth. And then we move further into 2027 and the cycle deepens. The August 2nd, 2027 solar eclipse in your seventh house becomes one of the biggest release points of the entire cycle. This is where a relationship chapter may reach completion, or an existing relationship may transform so significantly that it feels entirely new in some way. Then on August 17th, 2027, we have a Leo Aquarius lunar eclipse, which brings an emotional culmination across your first and seventh houses. And this is where you clearly see the balance between yourself and your relationships, between independence and partnership, between authenticity and approval, between becoming who you are and choosing people who support that becoming. Throughout this cycle, several important planetary alignments also deepen these themes. November 2026 may amplify relationship dynamics, bringing greater clarity around where partnerships are helping you grow and where they've become limiting. By April 2027, Saturn helps stabilize your identity and supports mature decisions around the relationships you genuinely want to invest in. Then during late 2027, especially as Pluto joins the North Node in Aquarius, this becomes one of the most transformational periods, really, of your entire life. This is big. Pluto crossing your first house while joining with the North Node isn't simply asking you to change. It's asking you to literally become, to shed identities you've outgrown, to reclaim your power, and to step into a version of yourself that is more authentic than ever before. Throughout this cycle, there are really important questions to start reflecting on. What began shifting around February 17th, 2026? What new version of yourself started emerging? What have you been learning about self-worth, trust, and emotional security since January 2025? Where have you been sacrificing authenticity to keep relationships comfortable? Where are you seeking approval instead of honoring your truth? What kind of partner reflects the person you're becoming? And who are you when you stop defining yourself through everyone else's expectations? Aquarius, this is your time to shift from people pleasing to authenticity, from defining yourself through relationships to defining yourself from within, from seeking permission to leading your own life. And as we close this out, remember this: the past couple of years have been helping you transform your relationship with money, trust, vulnerability, and self-worth. Now the cycle's asking you to transform your relationship with yourself, to release outdated relationship patterns, to become more confident in your individuality, to trust your own direction, and to understand that the healthiest relationships are not the ones where you lose yourself. They're the ones where both people have the freedom to become more fully themselves. Because the South Node in your seventh house is clearing away outdated relationship dynamics. And the North Node in your first house is helping you build a stronger identity, greater confidence, deeper authenticity, and a life that reflects who you truly are becoming. Pisces, welcome to one of the most healing and transformative cycles you're going to experience over the next couple of years. From July 26, 2026 to March 26, 2028, the lunar nodes move into Leo and Aquarius, activating your 12th house of healing, spirituality, endings, rest, and the unconscious, and your 6th house of work, health, routine, service, and the everyday systems that support your life. This is where major endings and major beginnings are starting to unfold for you. And for you, the cycle isn't necessarily about dramatic external events. It's about profound internal change. It's about clearing what has been quietly weighing you down so you could build a healthier, more intentional way of living. By the end of this cycle, you may not simply have a different schedule or career. You may have a completely different relationship with yourself. Leo rules your sixth house. This is the house of your daily work, your physical health, your routines, your responsibilities, your coworkers, and the habits that shape your everyday life. As the South Node moves through this part of your chart, there's a clearing happening around routines, obligations, and the ways of working that are no longer sustainable. Now, at the same time, Aquarius rules your 12th house, and this is your inner world, your subconscious mind, your spiritual life, your dreams, your intuition, your healing process, and the chapters that quietly come to completion before a new beginning can emerge. With the North Node moving through this house, this is where life is asking you to grow. So the cycle's asking you to move from constant doing toward deeper healing and conscious living. But the story didn't just begin in July. If you go back to February 17th, 2026, there was a solar eclipse in Aquarius in your 12th house. And that eclipse was our first initiation into this journey. For some of you, that eclipse may have brought an unexpected need to slow down. Others may have become more interested in therapy, meditation, spiritual practices, or simply spending more time alone. You may have noticed old emotions surfacing without fully understanding why. Or perhaps you realized that something in your life was quietly coming to an end, even if there wasn't yet a clear replacement. That eclipse planted the seed. Now, as the lunar nodes officially enter Leo and Aquarius, that healing process begins to deepen. At the same time, another important chapter is still coming to completion. Since January 2025, the Virgo and Pisces eclipse cycle has been activating your seventh house and your first house. And this has been one of the most personal eclipse cycles you've experienced. Over the past couple of years, you've been redefining who you are and how you relate to other people. Some relationships may have changed dramatically. Others may have strengthened through honesty and healthier boundaries. You've likely learned that being compassionate doesn't require abandoning yourself. You've been discovering who you are when you stop defining yourself through other people's expectations. Those lessons are still wrapping up through the final Virgo and Pisces eclipses in the end of 2026 and into the beginning of 2027. So this creates a bridge. One chapter has been helping you redefine your identity and your relationships. And the next chapter is asking you to redefine how you care for your mind, body, and soul. So now let's talk about what's changing for you. With the South Node moving through your sixth house, there is a release happening around your daily life. And this doesn't mean that you'll stop working. It means life is asking you to become much more intentional about how you spend your energy. You may begin recognizing where you've become overwhelmed by responsibilities, where you've prioritized productivity over well being, where perfectionism, overworking, or people pleasing have quietly become part of your routine. Some Pisces risings may change jobs, others may restructure their schedules. Some may finally begin taking their physical or mental health more seriously. Others may simply realize that the pace they've been living at is no longer sustainable. This cycle also asks you to examine the role of service in your life. Are you helping others from a place of love or from a place of obligation? Are you caring for everyone else while quietly neglecting yourself? This is your opportunity to create healthier boundaries around your time, your energy, and your well being. At the same time, the North Node is guiding you toward your 12th house. And this is where your deepest healing begins. You're being invited to spend more time listening to yourself, to trust your intuition, to process old grief, to release emotional patterns you've carried for years, to reconnect with your spiritual life in whatever way feels meaningful to you. And for some of you, this may involve therapy or counseling. This may also involve meditation, creative solitude, dream work, journaling, or simply allowing yourself to rest without feeling guilty. Aquarius brings unconventional qualities to the areas of life where it resides. So you may discover healing through new technologies in some way, online communities, innovative therapeutic approaches, or spiritual practices that challenge traditional ideas. The lesson isn't simply to withdraw from the world, it's to create enough inner space that you can return to the world with greater clarity and purpose. Now let's look at how the eclipses are activating this story. So the August 12th, 2026 solar eclipse in Leo lands in your sixth house. This becomes a major reset around work, health, habits, and daily responsibilities. You may begin a new job. You may leave an old one. You may completely change your lifestyle. Or you may recognize that your body has been asking for your attention. And then just a couple of weeks later, on August 28th, that the eclipse continues helping you complete the identity and relationship lessons that have been unfolding since January 2025. Now, by February 6, 2027, the Aquarius Solar Eclipse activates your 12th house once again. And this is a powerful new beginning around healing, spiritual growth, emotional release, and preparing for the next chapter of your life. The February 20th eclipse continues completing your first and your seventh house story, helping you integrate everything you've been navigating since January 2025. And then we move into 2027 and the cycle deepens. The August 2nd, 2027 solar eclipse in your sixth house becomes one of the biggest release points of the entire cycle. Old routines, jobs, responsibilities, or ways of living may finally come to completion. Not because you've failed, but because you're outgrowing everything. Then on August 17th, 2027, the Leo Aquarius lunar eclipse brings an emotional culmination across your 12th and 6th houses. This is where you clearly see the balance between work and rest, service and healing, doing and being, the life you create externally, and the life you nurture internally. Now, throughout this cycle, there's several important planetary alignments that deepen these themes. November 2026 may amplify questions around work, burnout, and daily responsibilities. You may clearly recognize where your current routines are supporting you and where they're slowly draining you. By April 2027, Saturn helps you establish healthier structures around your time, your health, and your priorities. This becomes an excellent period for creating habits that are realistic and sustainable. Then during late 2027, especially as Pluto joins the North Node in Aquarius, profound transformation unfolds beneath the surface. Old fears, old emotional wounds, old subconscious patterns, they begin dissolving so that a healthier, more authentic version of you can emerge. Much of this work happens quietly. Now, some of you may not immediately see how much you've changed, but you'll feel it. You'll notice that your inner world has become calmer, your intuition becomes stronger, your choices become more intentional, and your relationship with yourself becomes more compassionate. Throughout this cycle, there are important questions to really reflect on. What have you been learning about yourself and your relationships since January 2025? Where have you been staying busy to avoid what needs your attention? Where are your daily routines supporting your well being? And where are they depleting it? What emotional burdens are you finally ready to release? How can you create more space for rest without feeling guilty? And what kind of life becomes possible when your inner world is as healthy as the life you're building on the outside? This is your shift, Pisces, from constant doing to conscious living, from burnout to balance, from carrying the past to healing it. And as we close this out, remember this. The past couple of years have been helping you redefine yourself and your relationships. Now, the cycle's asking you to redefine the way you care for yourself every single day, to release routines that no longer support you, to make healing a priority instead of an afterthought, to trust your intuition, and to understand that some of the greatest transformations happen quietly, long before the world ever notices them. Because the South Node in your sixth house is clearing away unhealthy routines, unsustainable responsibilities, and outdated ways of working. So the North Node in your 12th house can guide you toward deeper healing, greater peace, spiritual renewal, and a life that feels aligned from the inside out.